If you do traditional banking, then you might be aware of SWIFT, the Society for Worldwide Interbank Financial Telecommunication. SWIFT is a vast messaging network used by banks and other financial institutions across the world to send and receive information quickly, accurately, securely, such as money transfer instructions. Now, in the recent past, a centralized SWIFT system has been used to shut down banks in North Korea and as a threat to shut down banks in Russia. So in today's video, we're going to review Russia's banking system announcement that they have a SWIFT alternative ready to go. And separately, we also have SWIFT completing new blockchain trials to advance their network position with the emerging financial technology. So let's review, what is SWIFT? What's happening in Russia? And let's discuss. Hey everybody, I'm Gary Palmer Jr., you're you, and together, welcome to Minting Coins. So hanging out here in my studio, little spider crawling upon me, but we are talking about SWIFT. So if you're familiar with banking, as we were talking about a second ago, you've probably heard of SWIFT to help send and receive money between banks, to do bank wires. This system for allowing banks to communicate with each other, not just banks within the same country, but most critically, banks internationally, banks across borders, banks across the world. So SWIFT is an important component. It's a major component because while an individual banking system or a network of banking systems may have their computers lined up and communicating well together, not all banks are in the same network. So to get all these banks on the same page and in the same network so they can understand their ledgers and know if person A is sending to person B and one person has enough money, or if a bank is authorized to send money or to record these financial transactions for government surveillance, the SWIFT network is this component. And so it's really interesting to see how SWIFT has been used in the financial systems in the past, and it's going to be really interesting to see how SWIFT evolves with the blockchain technology. The dynamic increases greatly when we look at the disconnect of the different world systems and how they're struggling to find the connection that they have, not just with each other, but with this new blockchain technology in the whole fintech space. So with that being said, I wanted to go over with you and to learn with you what is the SWIFT network, more about them, and then to look at what's been happening in North Korea, what's been happening in Russia, and what's happening with the SWIFT network and the blockchain space specifically. So with that being said, let's pop into the news and let's discuss. So wanted to start over here at Wikipedia and take a look at what Wikipedia has to say. And so here we have the Society for Worldwide Interbank Financial Telecommunication, otherwise known as SWIFT. And what they're doing is that they're providing a network that enables the financial institutions worldwide to send and receive the information about financial transactions or different messages between these institutions. And they do it in a way that is described as secure, standardized, and reliable. The SWIFT company also sells software and services to financial institutions, so they have a vested interest with financial institutions using their services and part of the suite of services that they provide. And so real quick here we have it says here in 2015 that SWIFT linked more than 11,000 financial institutions in more than 200 countries and territories who were exchanging an average of over 15 million messages per day. So it seems like a lot of messages per day to be going out, millions and millions. Let's see, so that's about over half a million messages every hour are being sent out across this network. And so they're comparing that to 2.5 million a day back in 1995. So a lot of institutions are using the SWIFT network to send information to each other, to verify information, to send the money transfers. So SWIFT here is a cooperative society under Belgian law and owned by its member financial institutions with offices around the world. So it seems like a global company that's centered in Belgium near Brussels. Started 44 years ago, founded in 1973, and it's in the financial telecommunications industry, providing financial telecommunications products. So they don't see themselves in the financial industry, at least according to Wikipedia here, and also according to their part of their name. They have the telecommunication, the financial telecommunication in there. But it's really interesting to just recognize that the messages they send in a secure, standardized, and reliable way may be mostly financial related, but could also have to do with applications that are not related to a financial nature, but still sending this information across the world. So diving a little bit deeper, moving over to Investopedia, getting a deeper sense, helping us understand what is SWIFT. So behind most international money and security transfers is a SWIFT system, a vast messaging network by the banks and financial institutions. And so again, nearly 10,000, this might be dated 2015 in Wikipedia. Over here it was saying more than 11,000. So this is probably still increasing even today. Sending 24 million messages, so the Wikipedia article has higher numbers there. But moving on, the world before SWIFT, prior to SWIFT, Telex was the only available means of messaging confirmation for international funds and international fund transfers across the world. And Telex was hampered apparently by low speed, security concerns, and a free message format. It's really interesting because I think when most of us in the Bitcoin and blockchain space think about low speed and security concerns, we think about banks, we think about centralization. If you've ever tried to send a bank wire from country to country or from even person to person, 2 days can easily turn into 5 days, and 5 days can turn into 2 weeks because the system can be really, really slow, and there can be all sorts of security concerns. So it's interesting how the past comes around to repeat itself. But moving on here, why is SWIFT dominant? So they're big. They have a lot of members, many banks, and so there's huge vested interest across the world for SWIFT to survive, since this is a critical component of other systems. And this Investopedia article goes on to mention that there's other messaging services like SWIFT. For example, there's Fedwire, Ripple, and Chips. And I think I've heard of Chips before. I haven't heard of Fedwire. I think we've all heard of Ripple. And but nevertheless, SWIFT is continuing to retain its dominant position in the market because it's had dominance since 1973, and Ripple has just come around much more recently, as well as probably some of these other systems. So its success is attributed to how it continually adds new message codes to transmit different financial transactions. And so that's a key component. I should really highlight that green right now. So that's a key component to its success. So its success is attributed to how it continually adds new lines of message codes. And we're going to get into that, because for SWIFT to continue surviving in the world of fintech and in the world of blockchain technology, abbreviated block tech, can we call it block tech? Less syllables. So in the world of fintech and block tech, SWIFT wants to stay dominant. They want to stay a major component of the system. They must be aware of the systems like Fedwire and Chips. And I would imagine now that it's definitely come to their attention aspects of Ripple, especially since we know for a fact from the news and from other sources that the SWIFT network is definitely experimenting with blockchain technology, and we're going to dive into that a little bit further. So before we begin to that, just wrapping up this information, nearly 50% of all SWIFT traffic is for payment-based messages. So this is what we were talking about earlier, is that they mention how they're a financial telecommunications company, yet only 50% of all their SWIFT traffic is for payment-based messages, and 43% now concern security transactions. Security transactions, that's pretty ambiguous. And so a security transaction could be financial related, it could be not financial related. We're just going to leave that to our imaginations and just recognize that 43% is payment based, and the other 50% is security transactions, and then the remaining traffic flows to the treasury transactions. And so there's a lot going on there in terms of what they're messaging in a secure and efficient way. And then their services revolve around the applications, business intelligence, compliance services, and then messaging, connectivity, and software solutions. And so I hope that helps with an overview of SWIFT and what SWIFT is. All these links, if you wanted to read further detail from Wikipedia or Investopedia, will both be in the show notes below for you to review. But moving on into the system of SWIFT and the news they're making coming out of CoinDesk.com, SWIFT is completing blockchain smart contract trials using blockchain technology, of course. And so the Interbank messaging platform has completed the proof of concept partnership with the startup Smart Contract. And this proof of concept is allowing users to connect smart contracts to data feeds, web APIs, and a number of payment methods. And so this is just a proof of concept. This is just a first step. This is just showing that the SWIFT network can play nice and work with blockchain technology. And these are just extreme baby steps. And so when people are reading this information, this might not really seem like news. This might not really have huge significance because they use a lot of boring words, and it's just not very sexy, and it's just not very exciting. But you got to recognize this is a foundational level of which the SWIFT network will be able to build on top of, right? And so at this core proof of concept level, what we have is the ability to connect smart contracts and users. Smart contracts is the blockchain, and users are people. And so the SWIFT proof of concept is going to connect the blockchain and people through data feeds, through web APIs, and through a number of payment methods. And by SWIFT allowing these services to exist and to then build on top of, SWIFT is going to be making itself needed in terms of the services that it's going to be providing. And by SWIFT getting an edge in, a leg up, a first in, providing these necessary products and services, connecting the systems, we don't know where this is going to go, but this provides a foundational basis for them to build and for them to grow their positioning inside the blockchain space, especially from their position of being connected with over 220 banks and financial institutions. Them more than anyone else are their audience, and they're the ones who are going to need to connect. When they say users, the bankers are the users. Those are their people who are buying into SWIFT. And so connecting blockchain information and the banks with the APIs and the data feeds of what's going on across different blockchain technologies. I don't think we could really underscore the significance of this because of the power and the evolution this gives the ecosystem in terms of what's capable for all people. So let's get a little bit deeper and see what's going on here. So there's a quote here from Sergey Nazarov, who told CoinDesk, "We have successfully completed a phase 1 POC with SWIFT, proof of concept, and are in active conversations about how to move further with the work that we've done." Again, foundational level, just proving that the system can work, that Swift can play nice with the network, and then they're going to be showing each other business cases of how to develop this further and what that's going to mean for the members of the Swift network, and the revenue that Swift is going to make from the value they're going to be providing the banking institutions in the blockchain space, directly competing with applications like Ripple. So Swift is working on a number of different blockchain projects with various vendors. Smart Contract has also partnered with Ari Jules from blockchain think tank IC3 to provide authenticated data on the daily Ether to US dollar conversion price for the Town Crier Oracle. And so providing authenticated data on what's going on with the conversion price of Ether to the dollar for these different blockchain think tanks. Swift is getting involved with different projects. The vendors that they're using are getting involved with a lot of interesting other projects, and this ecosystem is going to be connecting each other and developing the network for, if it's focused around the Swift network, then they're going to be developing the network for the banking institutions. And I'm not sure yet how this is going to be leveraged or apply for regular decentralized users, but this is important for us to understand how the evolution of the banking system is developing, so that, because banks aren't going anywhere. Even if Bitcoin moons and becomes, $1 million a Bitcoin, banks will still exist. Banks know what's going on. Governments aren't going to let them fail. Banks are going to be purchasing Bitcoin, and then they're just going to be leveraging the system and the blockchain technology the best they can with the level of control that they can. Again, I like to talk about AT&T. Think back to AT&T. There's no way at the time that AT&T would have wanted everyone in the world to use internet to make free phone calls. It was just counter to everything that AT&T was, being a telecommunications company, charging people long distance rates for calling, even one town over, let alone halfway across the world. And so AT&T couldn't control the evolution, the adoption, the growth of the internet, and what was to come. They could only adapt. And so AT&T is too big to fail. The government requires AT&T to exist. And so AT&T is still profitable. They're still making money. They're still buying up companies, and they've done that through the evolution of their products and services. We have to understand that the banks are going to evolve, and the banks are going to continue to exist, even if how they exist changes, and even if some of the banks do go under because of their lack of ability to adopt. It's a big industry, and there's a need for that industry, even if you don't have a need for it. And so as part of our education, we want to understand, how does the system work now? How is the system going to work in the future? And what is our positioning and standpoint inside this system, both philosophically and financially. So switching gears slightly, let's see, I wanted to pop open this article first. Sorry about that. And so there's this article here from Reuters where the Swift messaging system bans North Korean banks that were blacklisted by the UN. And so the Swift messaging system has the capability of eventually banning any bank that's a part of the network if they had the pressure, if they had the pressure to do so. And so why is this important? This is important because you have things happening in Russia, you have things happening in India and Australia with Bitcoin. You have the possibility of banks being shut down for political reasons and for other reasons. And so the Swift system, knowing that that's an integral part of how the interbanking works, they're a centralized system that's then able to shut down any major bank in the world if if they have the right people telling them to do so. And so in this case, the Brussels-backed SWIFT system cut off the North Korean banks under UN sanctions after Belgium said it would no longer give authority for those transactions. And so it seems as if the main decision to shut down the North Korean banks didn't come from the UN, directly, but indirectly the UN. Is really Brussels that gave the message that we're not going to support this, and so then the SWIFT shut down. The UN position put the Belgian government at odds with the UN sanctions, as it had given SWIFT exemptions to work in the sanctioned North Korean banks. The UN report said only United Nations Security Council Committee could determine whether a company could qualify for an exemption to trade with sanctioned banks and not individual governments. And so we have the UN here trying to override Brussels, and apparently successfully overriding Brussels, and the United Nations dictating which banks can be a part of the world system, and just telling Brussels that they are not allowed to trade with North Korea. And so we have situations that then have come out more recently around Russia. And so if America says that we're not going to trade with Russia, are other countries allowed to trade with Russia? And who dictates that other countries are or aren't allowed to trade with other countries? Well, that's the United Nations that's dictating this. And the United Nations that's dictating this has pressured Brussels, and then by pressuring Brussels has pressured SWIFT, and then SWIFT has shut down the banking system for the sanctioned banks inside North Korea. And so the three blacklisted banks named on the UN as being part of the begin with the Society for Worldwide Interbank and Financial Telecommunications, the SWIFT network, where the Bank of the Eastland, Korea Daesung Bank, and Korean Kwangsung Banking Corp. SWIFT said it had suspended these banks' access to its secure communication system, which the banks use for sending cross-border payment instructions. And so just like that, North Korea gets kicked off. The country was in the lowest users, so not very many people in North Korea were using SWIFT. SWIFT said that it complies with all sanctions regulations, but it also believes in being politically independent and keeping the system as open as possible. It has previously pushed back against efforts to have other countries like Iran and Russia excluded from the service. So what I read into that is that it's in SWIFT's best interest for SWIFT to have as many banks using the SWIFT network as possible. It's sort of like any network, and it's like any system. The more people who are using that system, the stronger that system is. Facebook has a lot of flaws, but the more people that use Facebook, the stronger Facebook is, simply because there's just more people there. The same thing could be said with Steemit. Like Steemit is a network. The more people we have there, the stronger it is, the bigger it is, the more attention that it has. The same with any sort of network. And for SWIFT, if there's a country that's not on the SWIFT network, then it's possible that that country can be on their own network. And if they're in their own network of secure bank-to-bank communications, then by definition, that's a different network. And if it's a different network, then by definition, then that is a competitor. And that'd be really bad for SWIFT if there was a major competing service for SWIFT that was able to operate under different rules, under a different playing field. Maybe that required banks to have both a SWIFT network and this other network. And so SWIFT really wants as many banks using the same network to keep everything in the family, and to keep that control, and to keep that revenue coming in. And so when we exclude North Korea, then not only is it bad because it takes North Korea out of their network, but it also creates fear, uncertainty, and doubt for the countries and the banking systems that are still in the network, that recognize, well, if they do something that the UN doesn't agree with, then they could get kicked out as well. And so if they recognize that that's a possibility, then maybe they're going to have to plan for that and create some sort of network of their own. Well, that has all been the case, and so that's where we are. And so let's take a look at this this article that's came out pretty recently in the springtime from RT about Russia and their banking system, and how the Russia's banking system has a SWIFT alternative already ready. And so if the SWIFT network was to shut down in Russia, the country's banking system will not crash, because according to the central bank governor of Russia, they have a substitute. And why do they have the substitute? Well, there's a quote here. There were threats that we can be discontinued from SWIFT. We have finished working on our own payment system, and if something happens, all operations in SWIFT format will work inside the country. We have created an alternative. And so nowhere does this talk about Bitcoin or blockchain technology, but it's critical to understand with what Russia is doing, with the acceptance of Bitcoin, with the creation of the Russia coin. If Russia is making any moves that go against the world, that go against the United Nations, like they have in Crimea, annexing Crimea from the Ukraine just a couple of years ago, which is why we have all these major sanctions from the UN and from the United States on Russia. Well, if they were to take another action like that, especially with the friendly nature that it seems is going on between Putin and Trump, the UN may respond to Russia. And if they respond to Russia in a way that affects their banking system, then not only is Russia going to be set up to accept Bitcoin, not only is Russia going to be potentially set up to implement their own Russia coin, but they're going to be able to send and receive normal fiat currencies just the same, without having the existing financial system collapse inside their own country. So that's interesting. So moving on in this article, a couple quick details. 90% of the ATMs in Russia are already working to accept money in the MER payment system. And the MER payment system is a domestic version of Visa and MasterCard. And as of January 2016, 330 Russian banks have connected to the SWIFT alternative, the system for transferring financial messages, which I suppose is called SPFS. And so this is really, really interesting. The crisis reached their peaks. So they've been working on this apparently since 2014, 2015, and then in the end of 2015, that they said they're close to completing it. And now, while the system has some drawbacks, such as that it doesn't work from 9 p.m. to 5 a.m. That's pretty inconvenient. Non-banking hours, it doesn't work. Moscow time and costs. Moscow time. Okay, so sorry, I missed a comma there. That doesn't exist. So two things that has drawbacks. One, it doesn't work from 9 p.m. to 5 a.m. Moscow time, and it costs up to 5 cents per wire transfer, which is regarded as expensive. So 5 cents per wire transfer doesn't seem expensive, but I suppose when a SWIFT network is doing 24 million transactions a day, then it could be a lot. And so it's just really interesting. So it's just important to recognize, what's happening with Bitcoin adoption, legalization across the world, particularly Russia. What's happening with Bitcoin and blockchain adoption, legalization across the different countries and the different banks across the world, and how they are saying negative things on one hand, but we know they're mining it and we know they're investing in it on the other hand. We see major issues with fiat currency across the world, let it be Greece or Venezuela. We know that America's hit major financial crises in the recent past. We know Russia's also hit major financial crises in the recent past. And as these developments continue to unfold, this is just information for us to have in our back pocket to understand how things are moving forward. The Russian alternative, the SWIFT, is developed, probably continuing to be developed, maybe so it can work outside Russia banking hours, maybe so it can be even cheaper, maybe so it can integrate with Bitcoin potentially and Russia coin. But at the same time, Swift is moving fully straight ahead into the blockchain space while hoping that Russia stays a part of this network. We just don't know where this is going, where this is going to end up. But I hope this information has been helpful for you to help understand the Swift network, the alternatives, the systems, the advancements that are going on, and how this plays with both the traditional banking systems and how this could lead into the future integration of traditional banking systems and blockchain technology. So with that being said, thanks for joining us. Thanks for showing up and being a part of the video. Tap that like button, comment below. What do you think about the Russian alternative to the SWIFT system? Do you think that this Russian alternative has anything to do with advancing their blockchain initiatives? And how do you think this is going to play in a larger space of the Russian bank versus the United States central bank? Are they setting up for conflict here, or are they just keeping a healthy, strong relationship in both of their respective camps? It's going to be really interesting to see where this goes. And we'll be excited to bring you updates as they come along. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time. I'm glad that together we're minting coins.